Hey, hi. Hey, everybody. Did you miss me? I don't know. I feel like it's been like a month and a half since I've done an episode. I literally just did Book of Enoch an episode ago, but I didn't do a bonus episode last week. So it feels like I haven't been doing anything, but I have been doing a lot. So there you go. Welcome to I Swear to Drunk I'm Not God. This is episode 13. And honestly, this is I didn't say on my Instagram post, but this is a two-parter. I'm sorry. I didn't know until I was like in the throes of research. I was like, fuck, this is a lot of information. So, now similar to my Treese Richardson, this is one of those moments where we're in for the long haul. Like we're going to be in this for a minute, but I'm okay with that as long as you're okay with that. And honestly, because I missed a bonus, I didn't do a bonus episode last week. I think it's fine. You guys are overdue, and I will be actually posting part 2 next week. I'm not going to skip next week to post part 2. That's just like rude, because then you all got to like remember what the story was, blah, blah, blah. Who knows? I may just post it earlier anyway, just so it's fresh in your head. Excuse me. But this is a part 2. Also, a two-parter. Also, I never really told you all how my surgery went. My surgery went well. I unfortunately got a little something going on right now in my throat, but that could very well just be allergies. I was fine 2 days ago. Right now I'm not so much, but surgery went good. Everything's clear. I got my deviated septum fixed. I had to go in twice for I had to go once for 2 weeks to get my nose vacuumed out. That was fun. I don't sound different, so that's a good thing. But I'm also, like I said, slightly congested right now because something's hitting me that I wasn't feeling 72 hours ago. So it is what it is. I took COVID tests. I think I'm fine. But, when you have an allergy to dust, it's like, what the fuck can you do? Dust is everywhere. What else? Other than that, I've been chilling. I've been MIA in a way, and been focusing a lot on fixing a lot of shit that was damaged in that last quarter of last year. Plus, just trying to basically mold myself into another version of myself that I like a little more than the last version, if that makes any sense. So, I'm been focusing on my health, going to lots and lots and lots of doctor's appointments, focusing on my mental health, seeing my therapist every week, and then doing this for you lovely folks, which I actually really like to do. And I find it very cathartic. I also find I find that it trains me to access a part of my brain that controls discipline, because another part of my life I do not control myself. So, but needless to say, I'm safe. I'm good. I'm having fun here and there, just not going crazy. I'm keeping my circle a little tight. And like I said, just focusing on me and my family and I keep saying it, I've said it multiple episodes, put Humpty Dumpty back together again. I've had to ask myself a lot of questions recently, and with everybody that I know and, people who have so much going on in their lives, I decided to hit the eject button on a lot of my relationships just so I can, figure some shit out on my own. With that being said, though, I am exploring, new situations, like not necessarily new relationships as far as like romantic ones are concerned, but I'm meeting some new people when I'm out, and that's dope. It kind of accesses a different part of my brain that allows me to be open to things that are not so familiar. So I've been doing that. I've also, like I said, been focused on my health. I lost 30 pounds. I had gained about 45 pounds during the pandemic. So I'm almost back to my 2019 self. So I appreciate that. And all of that is under, the supervision of many doctors as well as a nutritionist. So I'm at that point where instead of just trying to make other people proud of me, I'm trying to make myself proud of me. Okay. All right, cool. 5.5 minutes. Now, what are we talking about today? Today, we're going to talk about the Rampage of Laurie Dann. You ever heard of her? I had never heard of her. A coworker of mine had actually told me about Laurie Dann and had kind of given me an idea of who she was, what she was. But what I've realized, especially when you're researching these people, you know, you go in expecting to really investigate and think about the, you know, obviously the crime, the grotesqueries, who these people were, what they did. But, you know, sometimes it's all of the shit leading up that you're like, ooh, okay. All right. I see what's happening here. And this is one of those moments. So that's why I also want to split it into two, because if I did it straight through, it's probably going to be 3 hours. You're not going to listen to it for 3 hours. So I'll cut it in half. My audio is usually about an hour and a half. I don't have a lot of episodes that are shorter than that. I try to do this drunk, but I try to be thorough even when I'm drinking, but I also try to inject a little bit of my opinion here and there. So sometimes that takes time. And in this particular case, Laurie Dann is going to take some motherfucking time. Now, what am I drinking? So I found this recipe on food52.com. I'm going to post it in the show notes. It's called the Lemon Lavender Gin Rickey. The lemon lavender part sold me, and of course the gin sold me. I don't like it, but I will say this. It could be because I kind of modified the recipe. Like, as you know, and you probably learned in I can't remember if it was Book of Enoch or if it was the not Indian Predator. What is that episode called? The one about the gamer, whatever. I think I mentioned that I wasn't going to do those videos anymore. I'm still not, but I will make an effort to explain to you what I'm drinking as far as like the ingredients and things like that. So you could do your own thing without necessarily having to see it. I'm sorry. I told you before, I hate doing those videos. If you didn't listen to that episode, I'm going to say it again. I do not like doing the cocktail videos, and until I can get somebody that can help me do them, then I'm not going to do them. I'm sorry. The Lemon Lavender Gin Rickey. Now, that is 3 ounces of gin, 4 ounces of lemon juice, 2 tablespoons of honey. You can use agave nectar. You know how I am about agave nectar. Or you can use simple syrup. Totally up to you. 4 ounces of seltzer water, 2 sprigs of lemon, 2 wedges of lime. You pour the gin, lemon, and honey over ice in a cocktail shaker, and you shake it. And then you strain it into 2 glasses, or however many glasses, if you're listening to this, you know, with others. And then you top it with seltzer. Please do not put fucking seltzer water in shakers. They explode. Okay, just don't. Then you can garnish the glass with a sprig of lavender, and then you slice the lemon and bam, put it in there. I'm thinking I'm gonna do a version of this that on my own time, probably when I'm done with this episode, that consists of smoking it. I think it'll taste better smoked. And I also didn't use seltzer water. I didn't use honey. I basically didn't do this recipe. I used limonata, which I like, the lemon version, a little bit of honey. A little bit of lemon juice, honey, and then I use lavender syrup because I usually like that floral taste of lavender, but I don't like it. But I'm going to drink it anyway. Sip. Also, it just tastes like perfume to me. Also, I haven't had anything to eat for real, so I'm going to try to manage my alcohol intake during this situation because I'm not eating much in general. Like I told you, I lost 30 pounds. I'm not eating much in general. So because of that, I get drunker quicker. So I have to be mindful. I will say too that having that surgery on my sinuses definitely decreased a lot of my brain fog. I feel like my thoughts are a little more concise, when before it was just like, I don't know. I had COVID last summer too. My mom was like, maybe it's some lingering brain fog from that. But I noticed since the sinus surgery, since a lot of that inflammation had gone down, that I think a little clearly and my memory's better. So I'm very grateful for that. Now, bam, bam, bam. Let's get into episode 13, the Rampage of Laurie fucking Dann. Like I said, I had never heard of this woman. This is local. This is an Illinois/Chicago based case. And a coworker of mine, Michael, told me about it because another coworker of mine, Bridget, had mentioned in our group chat that her husband was, and once we get to that part of the story, I'll tell you that, the situation, but her husband was somehow connected to this situation. And I thought it was very, very interesting. So I don't want to tell you what that is because then it tells you what that is. So let's start from the very beginning. Who was Laurie Dann? Now, Laurie Ann Dann, which rhymes, her actual last name, her Dann was a married name. Her last name was Wasserman. She was born October 18th, 1957 in Chicago to Norm Wasserman and Edith Joy. They moved from the South Side to North Shore. Now, she was the youngest of two. Her oldest sibling was named Mark. Quote, Laurie always envied and admired her brother. When they were kids, she used to brag about his tennis and swimming abilities to her little friends on Sumac Lane. As the years went by, she came to believe that she was the only person who truly understood her difficult but outwardly tranquil family relationships. End quote. Now, overall, the family was strange. I mean, they would literally take the long way out of their neighborhood to avoid interacting with their neighbors. And Norm focused on work and tennis. And Edith, his wife, focused on her looks. And she also focused on how Laurie presented herself to the world. So she was all about appearances. Now, Edith always trivialized Laurie's issues instead of dealing with them. Laurie mostly hung around with boys. She was kind of funny looking in the beginning. She was never combative. She was very submissive. And she would never smile. She would sometimes stare at the other children. So, Laurie's mom was kind of weird because she hated to cook, and then they would go out to eat a lot, which I think is kind of strange for probably the 50s and 60s. But Laurie went on to West Ridge Elementary School. She wasn't a great student and was incredibly shy and seemed to take things really seriously. She would go to the Chippewa Ranch camp in the summer for activities. And for middle school, she went to Red Oak Junior High. She was still super shy there, but her grades got better. And she also attended special classes for children with learning disabilities at Washburn Junior High in Winneka. Now, they were really counseling group classes. They weren't like, you know what I mean? Like they weren't like the textbook type. They were counseling classes basically. Now, North Shore School District was actually known as the suicide belt because of the success standards set on the students in that area. A lot of suicides happened. In counseling, she would say things like she wasn't good at anything and she felt like a disappointment to her family. Laurie didn't feel loved or needed. She lashed out often to defend herself. And when people tried to help her during the classes, she showed signs of being obsessive compulsive, such as like good numbers and bad numbers. And her family had a history of mental illness. Even during her class photo, she was the only child not facing the camera. Now, about 1971, she would go on to Highland Park High School. She didn't do well. And at this point, she was developing and she started to get attention from boys. She started dating this guy named Chuck. Now, again, she was a little funny looking and he didn't expect to date her for real, but they ended up actually dating. And he was kind of an asshole because he wouldn't walk with her. He was embarrassed to be around her. And then eventually he called it off. Now, by sophomore year, she met Barry Gallup at O'Hare Airport when their families were on their way to Hawaii. Larry, what is wrong? What's wrong? Laurie and Barry became friends on the flight, and they would walk along the ocean together and they would kick it. And then they started dating. They would listen to music. Like, she seemed normal with him. They talked about kids, but they never really talked about marriage. So Barry knew that Laurie just wasn't into her parents. And he also knew that Laurie was neglected. Now, Laurie would eventually move to Glencoe, which is a north suburb of Chicago. Laurie would enroll in New Trier East High School in Winneka to start over. Her goal was to turn things around. She would even have her nose done because she was Jewish. So she kind of had like a pronounced nose and she didn't like it. And so she ended up getting her a nose job. Now she would transform into this beautiful woman. I mean, Laurie was really pretty. She would start to like date like a lot of guys. So she started dating this dude named Wade Keats. And in 1973, he met Laurie at a pool at a condo complex. She had on a necklace that said Laurie. So he hollered at her and he was like, yo, I'm from Winneka too. And meanwhile, she was still dating Barry. Now they started to see each other a lot, her and Wade. They were officially together. So Laurie couldn't really fit in with the other girls. She thought the school was like anti-Semitic. She would even go as far as to buy some of the girls gifts so she could just stand near people. I mean, she was just really, really strange. She would even cheat on her test. And there was one time where she walked directly behind the teacher and just started copying the answers during the quiz. Like, she was like, I need to know. Sorry. Don't know what to tell you. Now back to Barry. Barry missed her, and Laurie once visited him. Laurie would literally link up with Barry. And so he was like, yo, I think we should speak about these issues that we're having. She was not trying to hear it. She basically told him, don't tell me, I can't help you with that. I was like, wow, god damn, Laurie, because that is just like way robotic. So she would eventually break up with Wade because she wanted to date other boys. She wanted to have a little fun. And this is, again, she's still dating Barry. So there was even a guy who lost 50 pounds so he could talk to her. But she brushed him off 4 times before he eventually gave up. And she started dating this other boy named Rob Heidelberger, and even would steal from the neighborhood Kmart, because she was working at Kmart, for him. She would steal things for him before getting fired. Now, they dated in 1974. One time he got into a car accident on the way to junior prom and was late picking up Laurie, and she was not fucking happy, and nor did she care about his well-being given the fact that he was like in a car accident. So Rob would eventually break up with her, and she was like, whatever, I don't really care. So one day Barry got a call from someone claiming to be sleeping with Laurie. Quote, "You don't know me from Adam, but you should know I've been going out with Laurie. We've been having a great time together, including sex. She really likes it from me. She thinks I'm great. Those times when you dropped her off at work at Kmart or the country club, well, she called me up and I came to get her and we went out." Needless to say, that relationship ended. So Laurie would eventually enroll in Drake University in Des Moines, Iowa. She was studying education with the hopes of being a teacher. And at this point, she talked about going to Arizona for school, even though she was dumber than a bag of rocks. I mean, her grades did improve, but she just wouldn't excel when it came to that because she was really just more so focused on boys. Now, she would run into Chuck again at a wedding. It was a wedding of a mutual friend. And so Chuck spoke to her, just being cordial. And she was like, "Don't look at me. Don't ever look at me." I'm like, that's good job, Laurie was like, "I don't fuck with you. Don't look at me. Don't you ever look at me." Now, she would eventually transfer to the University of Arizona, where she studied to become a teacher, but instead ended up in home economics to study textiles. Now, people thought she was dull. She tried to join sororities, but the women just thought that she was using the sorority to find a new man, which she kind of was. I mean, she would make 5 or 6 dates with men in one evening, then randomly cancel all but one. She stayed booed the fuck up. And she was supposed to go on like this retreat once, but instead she was like shacked up with this dude for the weekend. And she was just like, whatever, like it is what it is. She was eventually confronted by the members of the sorority, and then she was forced to resign. So after her first year, she would go to the University of Wisconsin for a summer program in home economics. Laurie wasn't really interested in school. She was looking for a husband. She started dating this guy named Steve Witt. Remember his name. They had a great time together. They were known for making people uncomfortable with like their public displays of affection, and she was easily manipulated by him. I mean, he would date other women. He would see her when he saw her. That was his attitude. Now, she would eventually drop out of school because she was obsessed with him. She re-enrolled, and then she tried to have an exclusive relationship with Steve, but he kind of pretended like he was like, I'm cool. I'm cool with that. But, you know, she couldn't really stand him spending time with other people, and they would remain faithful to one another, but she was very obsessed with him. And so Steve eventually tried to put distance between them, and because of her obsession, she had literally pushed him away completely. Now, Laurie would return home and work as a cocktail waitress. She would transfer to Northwestern to finish her degree. Now, she would eventually drop out and not graduate at all. But this is when she met Russell Dann. That's her last name. He was an insurance broker who she met at the Green Acres Country Club, slightly older. Green Acres Country Club is in Northbrook, Illinois. And he was part of a pretty wealthy Highland Park family. So she developed an obsession with Russell. As the same type of obsession she had with Steve. I mean, his friends thought that she was terribly fucking weird. Her single-mindedness was annoying, and they all felt like she was just bland. They're like, what does this bitch contribute? But Russell really liked her. He even developed love for her, and she actually loved him too. And in 9 months, they would go to Boca Raton, and Russell told her that, you know, we should consider like getting married. So Laurie agreed. And they would eventually become engaged. Slowly but surely, Russell would notice that Laurie was developing certain superstitions, which we know is probably safe to call obsessive compulsions. She would have to like tap and touch everything. Sometimes at stoplights, she would get out of the car, tap her foot on the pavement, and then hop back in the car. And she would also hop over cracks in the sidewalk. She wouldn't let her husband leave work without tapping the couch first. So, I mean, she just textbook obsessive compulsive. Her house was also a fucking mess. And so over time, of course, because untreated, her obsessive compulsion was starting to get worse. Laurie would eventually get fired at her waitressing job for snapping on a group of women who kept changing their drink order. And in all subsequent jobs, Laurie would get fired for being disheveled, for having greasy hair. And so Russell decided to have a conversation with Laurie about her future. He was like, look, you ain't making more than $300 a year anyway. You know, it's okay. I make more than enough money for us both. How about you just stay home? He's like, this shit ain't working for you. Just stay home. And he told her, maybe start doing volunteer work. You know, it's not necessary for you to work. So she wanted to work. She wanted to be educated, but she would get so frustrated and so anxious, just so nervous. She felt like people should have education. People should take care of themselves, but her compulsion was really starting to take over. So Russell was becoming overwhelmed, and rightfully so. I got a new wife. She seems like she's kind of crazy. She wasn't that crazy before. But she also wasn't doing anything to really help herself. And her family was definitely not fucking helping. I mean, Russell would eventually buy a house so she could have more room for all of her habits, because she was one of those people, like, she would just have shit all over the place and then like claim she didn't have enough closet space, like people like that. She would eventually start to obsess over a neighbor's house being better. So, quote, as the movers brought furniture in the door and asked Laurie where the pieces should go, she said she couldn't decide. She had no idea, no opinion. There was no new beginning for her. Rather than concentrate her energies on self-improvement, she brooded on the apparent inequity that had her and Russell paying $178,500 for their house, while a family on the street behind them had bought a similar house for $20,000 less. She would say, let's walk over there so we can see the house. Now, Laurie suggested to Beth, which is another woman, when she came to visit, she was like, yo, we should go over there and see what their house would look like. She was like, she just had a baby, so we could see, we could say we're coming to see the baby, but I want to see if her house is nicer than ours. So this is who we dealing with, keeping up with Jones's ass bitch. Also, I meant to mention, I read for this episode, I actually only read a book, and it was Murder of Innocence. It's called Murder of Innocence, The Tragic Life and Final Rampage of Laurie Dann. Check it out. It's going to be in the show notes. You probably won't buy it, but I think it's worth the read because it's kind of crazy. Now, she would even go out, she would tell a friend that she fears that if she closed the kitchen cabinets, Russell would stop loving her. That's how her compulsions were going. And one time she was planning for a party and she put the pretzels out a week in advance. And she would also put out generic products and frozen vegetables or like rotten potatoes. And Russell was like, yo, what the fuck is happening? Because, you don't put out generic products for parties. So she would like leave canned goods in the dishwasher. She would put makeup in the microwave. She would put money in the oven. And then when Russell would ask her, he was like, why are you doing this? She would be like, quote, because that's where I put it. That's where I know where it is. So then Russell, he would put the makeup back in the proper place, but several days later, he would find it back in the microwave, or perhaps in the freezer, or in one of the cabinets. And gradually, with excuses and persistence, she'd just wear him down all the way. He's like, fuck it. Now, she would even go out with girlfriends and not bring her wallet. And then Russell would have to secretly reimburse her friends who picked up her tab. She even had the weird thing where she would just also let food rot. She had this thing for rotten food. It's very strange. And because there's so little that they know about obsessive compulsions at this point, they're just like, I don't know, she's just weird. Now, when the topic of children came up, Russell was super apprehensive. He was like, look, I'm concerned about her having children because she could barely take care of herself. I mean, she was throwing garbage everywhere. She wouldn't clean shit. Her clothes were all over the place. He was tired of it, but he didn't want to get a divorce. And for some reason, he felt responsible for her behavior. I mean, interesting. Speaking of kids, Laurie was not comfortable around children. Quote, the reality of little children seemed to confuse her. When she visited her college friend Pearl Gelb after Pearl returned to her parents' home following the broken engagement, she was often brought face to face with Pearl's 3-year-old niece, Samantha. The girl was always ready to play or jump into Laurie's lap. Oh, how darling, Laurie would say, drawing back and keeping her distance. How cute. Susie, Russell's sister, was annoyed with the fact that Laurie wouldn't even acknowledge her nieces and nephews. They were by marriage, but she was still like, yo, quote, when she saw them at the Green Acres Country Club swimming pool, she would walk right past them and not even acknowledge them, even if they were clamoring for her attention. Susie had even asked Russell if he would please mention to Laurie that it might be nice if she would just say hi to the kids. The next thing she heard, Laurie was furious at her for talking behind her back. So after that, Laurie spent a lot of energy trying to bring Susie down in Russell's eyes. I really don't know why Susie would keep trying. She once needed an emergency babysitter, and she asked Laurie to stay. She had asked Laurie, hey, yo, could you watch my kids for 15 minutes? But then Laurie was so late that Susie ended up taking her kid with her. And when she returned, Laurie lied and was like, yeah, I got into a terrible car accident. Quote, you know how reliable I am. But I was in a car accident. My God, are you okay? Susie said. I don't know, Laurie said. She was on the verge of tears, and Susie hugged her and gently guided her to her seat. You should call Russ, Susie said. No, don't, Laurie said. Don't. I'll tell him later. Where did it happen? On the highway, referring to nearby U.S. Highway 1, north of Clavey. How's the car? Oh, it's fine, Laurie said. I didn't really get hit, but I had to swerve real hard. And sure enough, when Susie walked Laurie out to look at Laurie's Honda Accord hatchback, the one her father bought her the year she was married, there wasn't a single mark on it. Laurie continued to hold her arm in the air and tell the same story to Russell at home. And when they went out to keep a dinner arrangement with Norm at a Cantonese restaurant, she said her wrist was killing her. It was so bad she acted as though she couldn't even lift a glass of water. Norm didn't express the least concern, but Russell, Norm is her father, just saying, but Russell worried all through the meal and out to the car. We've got to take you to the hospital, he decided. No, Laurie said, her arm still cocked tragically. If you don't go to the hospital with me, I'll put you over my shoulder and carry you. She lowered her arm. Russ, I made it all up. He said, oh, perfect. Now not sure what the fuck to believe. Shake my hand, squeeze it real hard. She shook his hand and she squeezed. Nothing was wrong with her wrist. He said, why'd you do it? She shrugged, I don't know. Laurie was apparently fearful of having children and felt more comfortable around dogs, which is like ditto. Same, sis. So after a year and a half of marriage, Laurie decides to go to a psychiatrist. Laurie was prescribed theoradazine, which was a major tranquilizer, which was supposed to help with depression, anxiety, and agitation. It's also used to treat psychosis. But apparently this, along with her birth control, really did not help that much, but did help with her mood swings. I mean, she didn't like therapy and she thought it was too difficult. She stopped going after the fourth session, to which the doctor replied, quote, I would hope that you would reconsider your decision about coming in for psychotherapy, as much as I feel that it is of extreme importance that you reconsider some kind of professional help. Now, at this point, it's fully understood that most of Laurie's problems stemmed from her fucking childhood. Norm and Edith had been vacationing in Florida, and whenever they were gone, she felt better. The further away they were, the better she felt. Norm was more focused on tennis than his daughter's well-being, and they were averaging 5 to 6 2-week trips per year to Florida. Now, Laurie and Russell would visit them in Florida, and they wouldn't even notice her OCD. So finally, Russell just snapped. He said, quote, I'm unhappy because I get home from work and you're in bed. Then you get in the shower and I go around picking up all the garbage off the floor and then I throw it out. And then I got to close every fucking cabinet, every drawer, everything you've touched. Then I have to try and figure out what other trouble you've gotten in all day. Laurie, I don't have a wife. I've got a fucking daughter, end quote. He basically tells her to take her ass back to therapy or be single. And she would soon stop taking the meds because she said that they made her nauseous. And then she started canceling her appointments. Now, the tough part of it all is that the more unhinged she was, the better the sex was, which, I mean, I don't know if you all have ever had sex with a crazy person. Crazy people are great lovers. And that's because they don't have boundaries. So they have this thing where it's like, I'm willing to do anything to make myself feel good, and in turn it makes you feel good. So crazy people sex is fantastic. I could vouch for it. Now she would kind of show a more like perverted side though. Like there was one time she mentioned wanting to be orally pleased by a fucking dog. Drink. When Russ finally told her he was ending it, she wasn't even really surprised. Russell would tell her parents. This was Norm's response. Okay, Laurie, hang in there. Don't worry about it. We'll be back in a couple weeks and we'll talk then. Russell was like, Norm, you son of a bitch. He said, you fucking son of a bitch. Do you have any idea what your daughter's going through? Because She was fucked up. She loved Russell. She did not want to get a divorce. She was really, really hurt, but she understood. She was like, I'm fucked up. So Norm and Edith, her parents, decided to return the next morning. By 1985, Laurie was bouncing around between her parents' home and Russell's. Russell was still giving her money. He was paying for her college tuition, even though she wasn't fucking gonna graduate. And she had Russ still, like, she was still sleeping with him. Like, they were still having sex, but they were sleeping in separate rooms. Now, she had hopes that they would try again, but that hope just turned into rage. And so one day, she woke up and she decided that he needed to suffer. She wanted revenge, and she would start lying, saying that she was pregnant. And she was like, nah, he was like, nah, I pulled out, because he apparently didn't trust that she was taking her pills. And she told him that she was basically turkey basting him. She was like, I steal your semen, and she can go to the Donahue show and have a test result broadcasted. If you youngins listening don't know who Phil Donahue is, Google it. He was great. Mind you, this situation is mad ghetto. Now, things obviously went downhill from here. He said flat out, bitch, you can't even get pregnant. Quote, you're never going to have kids, and you couldn't have any anyway, because you wouldn't know how to take care of them. You could never handle it. She then starts to brag about her efforts to take him to the cleaners. She's like, I'm taking all your motherfucking money. So Russ changed the locks on her ass, and her mental health took a nosedive. But this time it took a nosedive into fucking violence. She tried to claim that Russ was abusing her mentally and physically, and this was her excuse to get a gun. So one time, Russ caught Laurie cuddled up in the closet on the floor in a pile of bird seeds, listening to his phone calls on the other line. He called Norm, her father, and Norm was like, I understand. Tell her I'll be back in about 5 weeks. What? I just said that your daughter is in my closet, cuddled up on the floor in a pile of bird seeds, which is like, what the fuck is that? I wouldn't even know what to do. What do you do when that happens? You're like, oh, what shirt am I going to wear today? You go in your closet and your spouse is on the floor laying in a pile. First of all, where do bird seeds come from? Like, that's so random. Now, she would even pretend to be robbed just to blame it on Russell. She didn't even stage it right, because only one room was ransacked and only photographs of her were destroyed. So when the police came to investigate, they knew something was fishy. And on one of her many closet visits, she told him that if she goes, he's going. And if she can't have him, no one can. So she looked at this as fucking war. Of course, because she's a chronic taker, she tries to engage with Steve Witt again. He's married now, by the way, and she tells him, that they have a 5-year-old together. And this pissed his wife off so bad that she left town and was like, motherfucker, deal with it. Deal with it. I'm going to Boston. So Steve took this very seriously, and then he learned she was lying. Now, because it's the best decision to make 6 months after the divorce, Laurie decides to buy a gun. She buys a .357 Smith & Wesson for $275, a 50-count box of ammo, and a cleaning kit. Now, I don't know how much you know about FOID cards in Illinois. A FOID card is a firearm owner's ID card, which, according to my account on the Illinois State Police website, because I have one, quote, identifies a person as eligible to possess, acquire firearms and firearm ammunition as part of a public safety initiative in the state of Illinois. I just renewed my FOID card in October of last year, and it cost me a whopping $11. It's technically harder to get a driver's license, and the questions are super easy. And as long as you don't plan to kill anyone in 72 hours, they'll just mail you the card to your house. The questions on the app are basically, are you an illegal alien? Have you renounced your citizenship? Are you under indictment? Have you been convicted of a felony? Are you a fugitive? Now, given all the previous information, it's obvious that Laurie should not be granted the privilege of having a fucking gun. But whatever. At the time, Laurie only had to pay $5. Thankfully, Laurie was spotted at the Marksman Police and Shooter Supply Store in Glenview by a friend of the Dann family. He knew this crazy bitch was in the middle of a nasty divorce, and he immediately spread the word. He called around until word got back to Susie's husband, Russell's sister's husband, who told Russell, and Russell went straight to the police. Now, I could spend all day talking about Russell's issues with the police, but I'm not fucking going to. Russell does not like the police at all. I don't know his history. I don't know what they did to him, but he's not a fucking fan. Now, we know from previous episodes that the police generally don't give a fuck about a lot of shit, and this case is no fucking different. Russ did not like the police, and he thought they were incredibly useless, so the police did very little to help him or keep him safe, because he was nasty to them too. So Russ would go on a campaign to get this gun taken away from this woman, so he called Norm, her father, and he was like, whatever. That's what Norm said. Whatever. As far as I'm concerned, it's fine that she has a gun as long as she keeps it far away from me. That is what her father said. Now, Laurie's excuse for having the gun was that she was moving to Evanston and would need protection. In Evanston? It's Evanston. You'll be okay. And her father said that they keep the gun in a safety deposit box, which is like, come on. Now, I will say Russ is kind of a sap. Norm wanted Russ to agree to pay for 10 years of this woman's life at $20,000 per month and a $100,000 settlement. And during the divorce proceedings, Russ learned that Laurie didn't even graduate from college. She had been lying about her education. So he agreed to pay $1,500 per month for 2 years, 5 months of health insurance, and a $100,000 settlement instead. Now, Norm threatened to have her put into an institution, which would leave Russ on the hook for her entire life. He's like, I'm going to send her to the crazy house and you're going to have to take care of her forever. So Norm's issue was that Russ could technically afford it. And he felt like you should pay for it because she wouldn't even be like this if it wasn't for you. Russ's demands, all Russ wanted was his name back and his ring back. He ain't want shit. What she got? She can't even wipe her ass. What she got? So back to Crazy Down. Now, Laurie started to make a bunch of hang up calls. She would go and she would call pretty much everybody she ever met and she would just hang up. She would even go as far as to lie to a friend's spouse about their relationship to basically ruin them because, misery loves fucking company. And by 1986, this crazy bitch finds another man by the name of Dean Pappas. He liked her. He was older than her too, but he knew that she was he knew that she was kind of off. And so he kind of kept his distance. But his mother, Cassandra, she was really the only person to make Laurie feel somewhat normal. Cassandra felt like she was just a girl that just wanted her opinions to matter and she wanted to be heard for once. So they developed a meaningful relationship. Dean would eventually call this relationship off. And when Laurie stopped giving into him physically, she was like, whatever. She couldn't give a fuck. That same year, Laurie would somehow get a key to Russ's townhouse. Now, things would start to turn up missing. And one morning, Russ woke up screaming. He had this sharp pain in his chest. And when he jumped out of bed, he noticed a reddish purplish wound on his chest just above his heart. And he thought maybe he was having a heart attack and that he was maybe seeing the external signs of a broken blood vessel. So he looked down and saw an ice pick between the bed and the headboard. And of course, Russ calls the police, but he's so indignant that the police, they're like, we're not putting any fucking energy into helping you because you're an asshole. And there was some speculation that he did it to himself. But what they did notice was that even though the perpetrator didn't cause him to bleed, they were able to see that his muscle tissue had been pierced and there was a 10% collapse of his left lung. Additionally, this wound had small linear abrasions that indicated hesitation. So, sorry, my nose is itching. So in the meantime, her compulsions were getting worse. She would return to school, Northwestern, even though she was not a student, and develop a reputation for peeing on things. I mean, she would just piss on stuff. And then she would just start stealing shit. And then, which, you know, she kind of always did that. But her father would like really rally together with his white people threats to keep her out of jail. He was notorious for getting litigious anytime someone said something about her. And her doctor figured her compulsions were a reflection of a constant fear of something terrible happening because she associated her many behaviors with imminent doom. Now, around this time, she buys her second gun, a Smith & Wesson 32 caliber handgun. After getting evicted from the dorm, she wasn't supposed to be fucking living in anyway. She would need to work, so somehow she started babysitting, y'all. This bitch out here watching somebody's kids. And she would just fuck shit up. She would ransack her clients' homes. She would write on the walls. She would steal shit. Over time, she developed issues like wearing gloves when it was warm. She was so obsessed with meat and blood that one time she got sick because she had been eating old, rancid ass meat. And she would continuously still do that, calling people and hanging up shit. Now, she did this so many times that people got the authorities involved. They were like, yo, She would even continue to make claims that Russ raped her. And once saying that she was attacked by him, she said, quote, I parked 50 feet from the east entrance to the building facing east. And as I was leaving my car, Russell suddenly appeared and pushed me back into my car, making me fall backwards across the front seat and hit my head on the passenger side door. He took off his warm-up jacket and pushed it into my face to keep me from screaming. He told me, don't scream, I have a weapon. He told me he wanted me out of his territory. Then he said, but as long as you're here and in a cute leotard, why not watch me masturbate in your face and listen to me talk dirty? Then he shoved my head against the car door and started to masturbate. If you talk dirty, I'd come faster. He said, come on, Laurie, tell me how much you like the outdoors, the excitement of being caught. Put my cock in your mouth, you bitch. And when he finished, he ran to his car, which was parked in the same lot 4 cars away, and drove to a different place in the same lot. A guy who works here came over to help me when I rolled up my window and asked him for help. Rolled down my car window and asked him for help. He saw me in the car with semen on my face. And then I found a roll of toilet paper in my car and wiped the semen off. She didn't look as though she'd been beaten up until later. And when she came to the Northbrook police to complete her statement, at that time, she had showed off a wound on her head and blood along with her hairline. She had also produced the wadded up toilet paper that she said had Russell's semen on it. Now, they didn't believe that. They didn't believe that at all. I mean, I think at this point we could see that she's a pathological liar. So she would eventually try therapy. And she would try meds. The doctor had tripled her dosage and she was to go to OCD therapy 3 to 4 times per week. But unfortunately, some of her meds started to cause hallucination and vomiting. So they had to make adjustments. And the phone harassment worsened. At this time is when she brought her third gun. She bought a 22 caliber semi-automatic handgun. Quote, she made 59 harassing calls between the hours of 11 p.m. and 1 a.m. 3 nights later, she came I'm sorry, 3 nights later came another 28 calls between 1:52 and 2:30 a.m. She could call anybody, old friends from her past, former lovers, and even former babysitting gigs. Her phone victims were so fed up and went to the authorities again. And the authorities really couldn't do anything because Glencoe and Highland Park are in 2 different counties. So they claimed they couldn't just arrest somebody for being weird. Sound familiar? Sounds a lot like Myrtrice Richardson, right? It's like, we can't arrest somebody for just being crazy. It's like, well, I mean, in this case, maybe you kind of can. But what they did do, Glencoe would eventually release a public safety notice telling people to start vetting their babysitters, which is like, God damn, how many movies? I was talking about this with my coworker because I was like, damn, when I think about it in the 1970s and shit, you think of movies like Halloween and shit like that. The fucking babysitters used to be like 15 looking after like 8-year-olds at night, which seems so fucking ridiculous now. Now, because the OCD wasn't really understood at this point in the 1980s, it's possible that Laurie was overprescribed drugs. I mean, she was taking a lot of drugs in high doses, and it's believed that Laurie could have been manic depressive and possibly schizophrenic. But because they isolated her condition to OCD, she never really got the treatment she truly needed. And Laurie always wore these goddamn gloves and would say that she was like, I'm sensitive to hot and cold metal. And she would wear a sweatsuit, and it needed to be red or pink. And then she would sometimes wear pajamas. And then she would use her own fork at the salad bar, which is like gross. And then, excuse me, and then would get in line and just stare at the food. She would also start to follow the floor tiles, only turning at 90-degree angles. Now, her weight gain was concerning, which, same sis, she gained 50 pounds, and they were like, yo, where is Laurie at in this bitch? But then because of the weight gain, she developed bulimia. She was bulimic, and she was known for binging and purging. She stopped washing her hair, and then she would eventually cut her hair with a pair of scissors and then like dye it this strange color red. Now, I'm actually moving pretty fast, so I maybe get this done in an hour. So in 1988, Laurie returned to the University of Wisconsin. She was back in this building known as the Towers of Madison. She was there 11 years earlier, though. Now, Laurie was already in her 30s at this point, but her father would lie on the housing application and say that she was 7 years younger than she was. She never studied, she never went to class, and she never had any books. And she would wander the fucking halls and obsess over the elevator. She would press all the buttons. She would ride all the way to the top. And when someone would tell her that she had reached the top, she would say, I'm going higher. So they started calling her Psycho Elevator Lady. Mad rude, but it is a little psycho. She is on an elevator and she is a lady. Makes sense. Now, she would also snap on people if they asked like who pressed all the buttons, which really reminds me of Eliza Lamb. Have you all ever seen that video? I'm sure most of you have. If you haven't, then watch the documentary on Netflix on the Cecil Hotel. I may do a bonus episode on the Cecil Hotel. Actually, I was thinking of doing a bonus episode on the Times Square Killer too, because I feel like that documentary just flew right under the radar. That shit was wild. It's kind of along like Son of Sam / Grim Sleeper type shit in New York. I had no idea what it was about, but then the Cecil Hotel Eliza Lamb video, if you look it up on YouTube, is this Asian girl who was in LA at the Cecil Hotel, which is kind of like this derelict hotel. There's a surveillance video of her getting on this elevator, pushing all the buttons, acting weird and all this other shit. And, people think it's paranormal. People think that, maybe something was following her. And then there's the side of it where people think that she's mentally ill. But what was interesting is that, there's parts of the elevator that's like operating weird, like all the buttons are pushed, but then the doors don't close. It's a whole fucking thing. So it's Eliza Lamb. Look it up. It's creepy. Don't watch it at night. Now, her schedule, though, on this elevator was to ride to the 5th floor, then walk up to the 6th floor, then ride to the 2nd. Now, she would do this repeatedly. She would also go down to the lobby and stare at the TV screen. Didn't matter if the channels were working or not. She would just watch the static. And when she did find a channel, she loved Love Connection. My 80s babies, y'all remember Love Connection? I used to watch that show. Now, her thing was to switch back and forth between Channel 7 and 21 as fast as she could. She gained another nickname, 721. And so one day a resident even found Laurie in the stairwell, completely nude, slamming the fire door. Meanwhile, her father didn't think she needed hospitalization, even though he and Edith spent most of their time in Florida, until finally her doctor begged her to admit herself. And Norm finally hopped on board. Quote, from Florida, he composed an anguished letter that he told Laurie was the most important and hardest he would ever write. He asked for a favor. Would she allow herself to be hospitalized for treatment by Dr. Greist? She could not, he wrote, continue to miss appointments with the doctor in the belief that the drugs she was taking would cure her. Hospitalization, he said, was the only way she would recover. In a final desperate plea, he told her that if she would enter the hospital to be treated, he would give her permission to put him in a nursing home when he got older. See Grice, he wrote, do it for me. So Laurie was escalating. She would start to call people and just flat out say, I'm going to kill your children. Yep. She would start to call people and say, I am going to kill your children. She once called Susie and sang, Susie, Susie, I'm going to kill you. She was becoming way more bold and way more scary. She would hide her voice, and then as the conversation continued, she would lose it. And what's weird is they were like, I know who this is. Is this you, Laurie? And she'd be like, yes. Now, the police would continue to be useless until Steve Witt managed to get the Arizona FBI involved. The agent involved, Perry Cole, would touch base with the Illinois officers and learn of everything. I mean, they were pursuing an indictment, but they would need both states to put their evidence together. So, of course, after they started bugging the phones at the Wits, Laurie stopped making calls and saying anything. She would just call and then hang up, and then she'd like make weird noises, or she'd like call collect only to hang up when the operator connected the call. She was just being a nuisance at that point. So Steve finally gets the call. This is how it goes. What do you want? Steve. She said this actually in a whine, her voice high, trembling, and cartoonish. It reminded him of the Wicked Witch of the West. You know what I want. What do you want? He said, feeling fully fucking disgusted. You know, and I'm going to annoy you until I get it. The threat had been almost pleasant lilt. Listen, it's been many years, okay? Why don't you leave us alone? I don't think you understand. First of all, I can't even tell your voice, but I assume this is Laurie. Of course. So what do you want? You know. She was teasing him like a big sister might torment a little brother. No, I don't. Yeah. Drawing out the word in 2 syllables. You'll see what I'll do. Why don't you stop talking in this immature voice and tell me what you really want? You know what I want. You know what I'm going to do. He said, no, I don't. Yeah. No, I don't. Yeah. And I always get what I want. Obviously, you haven't. I will. Why don't you tell me? What is your problem? Huh? No problem. You know, I think you need to get help. Uh-oh, I do. The inflection so strangely upbeat, it was hard. The inflection, excuse me. It was hard to tell if she meant it. Are you getting it? Yeah. Again, the whiny indifference. I mean, seriously, Steve said, you need help. Uh-huh. Okay, so you can get on with your life and we can get on with our lives. It's not going to be that way, though, she said. Why not? Because why? Her voice dropped lightly into a growl. Because of who you are. And who is that? I can guarantee you one thing. What's that? You won't live to see your baby grow up. I promise you. Oh, yeah? Uh-huh. Steve's voice was dull and non-confrontational. So you're threatening my life, huh? No, I'm going to do it. You're going to do it, huh? Yeah, I think you deserve it. Yeah, and how many other people are you going to take along with you? Does it matter? Why don't you get help? I don't want to. I think that would be best. No. Before you get yourself in trouble and other people in trouble, I won't. She was just being a brat at this point, arguing to piss him off. He cleared his throat and he waited for her to continue. I already have the way to do it to frame Barbie, she said to frame Barbie. Yeah. Take a knife from the place you ate, it'll have to be her prints on it. And they'll just say that she had problems after that. I don't think so. You want to make a bet? I'll give it a try. Listen, why don't you get help and leave us alone, all right? No, I think it's been a long time and I think you're having some problems here, okay? I think with time, you'll forget whatever happened in the past with anyone you've ever been with and you can get on with your life. But making threats about killing me and my family or anyone else is not going to solve your problems. It will. It will make me feel a lot better. No, it won't. I'll give it a try. Well, you'll be surprised what I do. Yeah, well, I've already found out what you'll do. You haven't seen anything yet. That's child's play. Well, you're acting childish right now. I know. What's the difference? Well, I don't think we need to talk anymore, okay? Go get help. I'll talk to you later. Bye. Steve would later buy a gun. That's the end of part 1. She's nuts. Way fucking batshit bonkers nuts. So let that marinate. And I'll see you all next week. Okay? That was me trying to do my prank call voice. We'll talk next week because we got more bitches. All right. It's been an hour. Love you. Mean it. Hope you enjoyed this part 1 of the Rampage of Laurie Dann. Bye.